Welcome back guys for some more Pokemon Go. Now from the title of today's video you've probably guessed that it's going to be a little bit different from our usual shiny hunting or event grinding. Even if you're new to the world of Pokemon Go, you're probably quite aware of the long list of long-standing and long overdue to be fixed issues the game has. So today I'm going to be discussing some of the biggest issues I think Niantic really need to address if they plan on keeping the game active for the long run. A small caveat to keep in mind though is Niantic don't always have control over the things that are going on during development. The Pokemon Company still own the IP and have a say in a lot of the things that go on in the game. But that being said, everything that we're going to discuss today should be in Niantic's control. So yeah, this is stuff that they should be able to fix. I just thought it was something that I should point out because a lot of people don't know that. So yeah, just keep that in mind guys, that Niantic aren't always the ones to blame. So moving on to the first thing that we're going to talk about today, it is the news tab. In short, the news tab isn't designed very well at all. It needs to be revamped to show what is going on in the game more accurately. Too often after an event or a feature is announced, the news is then removed before that stuff is even added to the game, making it really difficult to actually find the information. I'm always relaying information to you guys, but too often I can't find what I need because it's either been removed prematurely or it's been mixed in with a whole bunch of other information, making it really hard to find. Other times, new things that are happening in the game aren't even posted to the news tab. Instead, they're posted up on their socials. The perfect example of that is the Execute Makeup event that we just had. Yeah, there was no mention of that on the news tab whatsoever, so that really alienates people that don't have access to social media or just don't use social media. They don't know what's going on in the game and they rely on word of mouth from people in the community or stuff like that to get told what is going on instead of actually being told official news from Niantic themselves. But then for some reason there's still news about com days that passed, a couple of weeks ago in the news tab instead of, actual relevant news. So yeah, that's pretty much the gist of the news tab. Just needs to be fixed so it's more focused on what's actually going on in the game at that time. This is just another example of the whole Niantic suck at communication thing. So that's what we're going to talk about next, communication. We all know that since the day the game came out that Niantic has been, what's the word I'm looking for? Shit when it comes to communicating with the community. But lately things feel like they're at an all-time low. It's been over a year now since Liz stepped away from the community manager role and Niantic haven't done anything about it. They haven't shown any interest in replacing her, and that shows that they're not really interested in communicating with the community. Instead, they choose to stay radio silent until the community outrage gets that loud that they are forced to respond. This shows a complete disinterest in community feedback and even a lack of respect to the community and the people that are essentially keeping their lights on. I mean, they even flew out a bunch of community leaders like Nick and Zoe to help give them some community feedback and brainstorm ideas, but they still haven't really implemented anything that they suggested. So what was the point of that? It was basically just a way of placating the community, so we basically forget and move on. But saying all of that, there is the rare occasion when Niantic do actually change something for the good. But these changes usually come way too late or, like I said before, as a way of just placating the community. Honestly, I could keep going on about this issue because it's probably one of the biggest ones that Niantic have, but for the sake of this not being a 3-hour video, we'll move on to the next topic, which is disclosure of the shiny odds. This one is fairly self-explanatory. We need the shiny odds disclosed for both raid and egg shinies. Wild odds would be nice too, but they're not as important because even during most ticketed events, the people that don't have a ticket still have access to the shinies, and then they're found in the wild for free anyway, so you're not actually putting money towards those shinies. This issue is probably just an extension of the Niantic can't communicate issue, but I feel like it's a big enough one to have its own discussion in the video because yeah, these are essentially loot boxes, and by law they should be telling us what the actual odds of rewards dropping from loot boxes are, because people are putting money towards these things. They're essentially buying something. But I'm sure Niantic have some legal loophole that allows them to skirt around this and not actually release the odds. But I just feel for the sake of transparency and an olive branch actually being extended to the community, they should release the odds, because I can't see why it would hurt. I mean, we already have a rough estimate of what they are from the research that the Sylph Road has done, so what's the harm in actually telling us? PvP. Where do we start with this one? Lag, and oh, some more lag. Well, there is that, but I actually did a Google search before I started this part so I could get a little bit of a refresher on some of the issues that have been long-standing in the PvP, and I think the search results speak for themselves. The first 4 search results that pop up when I type in Pokemon Go PvP are Pokemon Go PvP is trash, Pokemon PvP is rigged, Pokemon PvP is broken, and Pokemon PvP is bad. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like it's being painted in a very shining light. If it's not graphical issues like the Switch tab covering over your charge moves so you can't actually use them, it's issues like the game locking up when you try to use a charge move, or them just not registering when you've actually tapped on one. Or losing matches because your game has become non-responsive, but your opponent is still free to just nuke your Pokemon out of existence. These types of issues should be at the top of Niantic's list, but some of them have been in the game since PvP was added. And also, the lack of status moves and abilities can make the battles a little bit one-dimensional. While debuffs and buffs are a nice addition, they rely on chance, and you can't really rely on that strategically. Even with all these problems, it was nice to see PvP get a run at the European International Championships. It shows that it has a chance of actually being a really competitive esport. Niantic just have to fix these issues if it's to have any chance. And I hope it really does, because it would really help the longevity of the game. Next up is another bug-riddled feature of the game, raids. The raid system is in need of a huge overhaul. Firstly, I think we're at a point in the game's life where not releasing a shiny for a legendary raid boss on its first run is probably doing more damage to the game than good. In the past, that was fine because people were just happy adding new and stronger Pokemon to their teams so they can battle each new raid boss. But after years of repetitive raid mechanics and rinse and repeat raid bosses, that novelty has sort of worn off. People already have teams of counters from every type that they've invested resources into, so unless a new raid boss has some meta relevance, people lose interest in it really quick. I see this on a weekly basis when hosting raid hours. The weeks when there's a shiny available are always so much more active than the weeks when there's not. And then on top of that, for some reason, the non-shinies are always around for so much longer than they need to be. Surely they have to see a significant drop-off in revenue when they do this, so it boggles my mind why they keep persisting with it. Next raid issue is the invite system. Again, every week I have to deal with the issue of sending out invites to people and them either not getting them in time, not receiving them at all, or not being able to actually use them to get into a raid. I think if we're running a private lobby, instead of there being a countdown timer, we should actually have a ready button. That way you could wait for the people that you've actually sent an invite to get into raids. If they're having issues, you can resend invites, all of that sort of stuff. I just feel like that would negate so many issues. But for some reason, Niantic don't want to add a ready button like every other game that has lobbies. There's also the issue of being booted from raids and losing your pass, but Niantic have actually done a fairly good job of negating this through just making it that your pass doesn't get used until you're in the actual raid, and then usually you still get a chance at catching the Pokemon even if you can't get back into the raid. But even if you do lose your pass, they're actually pretty good at reimbursing them, so all you have to do is contact them, and yeah, that's one thing that they're actually good at. Again, there's a lot more that I could add to the raid section, but for the sake of the video, we'll just add 2 more things. Auto selection sucks, and there's no logic in only being able to hold 3 remote raid passes at once. Next up is event timing. one of the biggest issues that Niantic has had lately is playing around with event times, mainly Community Day, claiming that they're trying to increase player engagement. They state that only 5% of the player base play for the whole 6 hours, so this was enough of a reason for them to change it back to a 3-hour event. But now they're also switching it from morning to afternoon, which I can only guess is an attempt to try and help the people that may have obligations in either time slot play the next time. While all of this sounds noble in Niantic's twisted logic, all of this could have been avoided if they just left it at a 6-hour event. Whether only 5% of the player base played for the whole 6 hours wasn't really the point. It was more about the flexibility it gave people to maybe play for a couple of hours during the day at some point, even if they had obligations. Because at the end of the day, this is a game and real life should come first, and people shouldn't be forced to choose whether or not they, catch shinies or do something in their real life. If they really wanted to increase player engagement, maybe putting a little bit more effort and creativity into event planning would do so, instead of just the same old rinse and repeat quest every month with a new coat of paint slapped on it. But like everything in this game, timing isn't the only issues with events, especially if you live in the Asia Pacific region like I do. If you've been playing Pokemon Go for any period of time now, you're probably fairly aware of the problems that the Asia Pacific region has with events on a fairly regular basis. We are plagued with issues like featured spawns not being switched on, shinies not being switched on, unplayable lag and game crashes, you name it. The wrong quest rewards being rewarded and then taken away and, fixed quick smart, unlike the actual issues in the game. And the list goes on. It really feels like instead of actually testing things before they release them, they just use us as the guinea pigs to iron out any bugs that may affect their main player base in the Northern Hemisphere. The perfect example of this is when they release a new feature, i.e. the new mega update that they just released, they give it to us in the Asia Pacific region first under the guise of goodwill, but it's just so if anything does happen to go wrong, it only affects us lowly scrubs here and not their actual main player base. Surely, with the amount of money that Niantic has made over the last 6 years, that they could afford to hire testers, they could test all of this stuff before they pushed it live, just so everybody could have a nice experience in the game. But sadly, we're not the only demographic that Niantic neglect. People living in rural locations are also largely ignored and overlooked when it comes to events or basically anything that goes on in-game. Have you ever been on a long road trip, pulled up at a rest stop, pulled out your game, thought I'm gonna catch a bunch of Pokemon, opened it up only to find a single Rattata and like a Pokestop or a gym all the way over in the distance where you can barely see them? Unfortunately, this is the reality for a large portion of the community. Now, Niantic have added the ability to submit Pokestops, but that only works if you've got actual points of interest to turn into Pokestops. And because of this, I've actually seen a lot of people say that, if you live in a rural location, then this game probably isn't for you. But I don't agree with that. I don't think that your geographical location should impede your ability to enjoy a game. Plus, in my opinion, Pokemon should spawn more in less densely populated areas because 1, that's how animals actually work in the real world, and 2, it would encourage actual exploration. A lot of events like limited research days, collection challenges, and even community days are designed in most part around people that live in cities. And that's okay, given that that's where the majority of their revenue would be coming from. I just feel that more effort needs to be put into making sure that the game is enjoyable for everybody else too. But now that Incense has also been nerfed, that's making things just a little bit harder to do. So let's talk about that next. There's not really much to say about this one, except this has to be one of the most backwards decisions Niantic has made since ever. I can understand that they're trying to promote the outdoor play aspects of the game again, but this is not the way to do it. You can't take things away from people as an incentive and expect them to be happy about it. However you feel about this decision, it has so many more negative effects than it does positive. First of all, people with disabilities have so much less access to spawns now, which can seriously limit the engagement that Niantic seem to care so much about. This is made even worse during events like GoFest, when you're relying on an incense to bring in incense-only spawns so you can finish collection challenges. Not to mention, this is also another huge middle finger to the rural players who are already feeling hard done by and forgotten. I feel like if they were going to do something like this, they should have turned it into some sort of game mechanic, like linking it with the buddy system, making it so as long as your buddy's walking with you on screen and has earned a heart for walking, incense will be boosted. That way they're promoting another system in the game, and they're also promoting their whole get out and go mantra that they're so keen on, pushing on all of us. But we are talking about Niantic, remember, and coming up with creative solutions to problems is not their strong suit. So this brings us to the last topic of the video. This one isn't really that big of a game-breaking bug. I mean, it doesn't really break the game at all. It is just something that annoys the absolute shit out of me. Pokemon from Incense spawning right on top of other Pokemon. When there's a large cluster spawn on the screen and space is at a premium, fair enough, this stuff is going to happen. But even when there's only like 1 or 2 other things on the screen, more times than not, it just seems to happen. It's like the incense spawns are just drawn to other Pokemon like a magnet, and then to make it worse, you can never click on the damn thing. The other Pokemon is just protecting it like a bodyguard, and you always have to click on that one first, and it's also the feistiest Pokemon that you've ever encountered, and by the time you finish catching it, the other one's gone, and I can't imagine how many shinies from com days and stuff like that I've lost because of this issue. And I hate it. I also feel like it would be an easy fix as well. All you would have to do is flag a spawn point as being occupied if something's using it. And all this sort of stuff should already be in the game's code to stop, wild spawns spawning all up in each other's grills. But yeah, I can't imagine that this is something that's very high up on Niantic's fix list. So until then, I'm just gonna have to suffer, and I hate it, and I just hate it. I hate it so much. So what can we take away from all of these issues? I mean, from my point of view, I can't help but think that Niantic has just lost interest in developing the game. They've made their billions of dollars, they've developed their AR technology, and they're just ready to move on to their own projects. But before they can do that, they've got to kill off this game so they can repurpose all the assets that they've tied into it. I know it sounds like a Team Rocket scheme, and it's probably a bit on the extreme side, but I can't help but think that there's some truth to it. How else do we explain being so unintentionally incompetent and not learning from your mistakes? Either they are Team Rocket, or they're doing this stuff on purpose. Jokes aside, there's no denying that the game is in a state of decline. 2.5 years of COVID have definitely had a huge impact in that, but there were signs of this stuff happening even before the pandemic started. The repeat events and slow rollout of Pokemon just isn't enough to keep people's attention anymore. The novelty of going out to a park with your friends to catch your favorite childhood Pokemon have faded. People have moved on, including some of the main PokeTubers. There's still a very large die-hard community that was evident during the Hear Us Niantic movement. The game is still very active. It's just unfortunate that it's never going to go back to what it was like during 2016 and 17. I just hope that Niantic can address these issues and the many that I didn't talk about today, in the hopes that they can keep the game interesting for the foreseeable future. So that's it, guys. If there's anything else that you think that I missed that you would like to add, please leave a comment below. I would love to hear what you guys have to say, what you think needs to be fixed, all of that sort of stuff. And yeah, hopefully Niantic will actually start listening to the community and taking some of this feedback on board and changing some things. A man can dream. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay safe and happy hunting. Stars in the sky. The stars are tonight. We might be